The first time my friends came to my house, I wanted everything to be perfect. But my stepsister walked into the room, smiled at me, and dumped an entire cup of coffee over my head in front of everyone. She thought I would stay quiet like always. What she didn't know was that this time, I was done being the victim. Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy emotional family drama stories, shocking betrayals, and satisfying endings where karma always catches up, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Now, let's get into today's story. My name is Anna, and for most of my life, I felt invisible inside my own home. After my mom passed away when I was 14, I was left living with my stepmother, Karen, and her daughter, Jessica. At first, I honestly believed we could become a real family. I couldn't have been more wrong. Jessica was only a year older than me, but she acted like she owned the entire house. She treated me less like a sister and more like a servant. If she wanted water, she called me. If she left dirty clothes on the floor, somehow it became my problem. And every single time I tried to stand up for myself, she would run to Karen and twist the story. The worst part? Karen always believed her. "Anna, stop being so dramatic. Jessica is just teasing you." She would dramatic. Those were the words I heard. I stopped arguing. I learned that staying quiet hurt less than fighting a battle I could never win. The only thing that kept me sane was my group of friends. Sophie, Emma, and Mia had been with me since freshman year. They knew I didn't talk much about my family, but they respected my privacy. One Friday during lunch, Sophie suddenly smiled. "Anna, we've been friends for years, and somehow we've never been to your house." Emma laughed. "Seriously, are you hiding a secret mansion from us?" I laughed with them, but inside, I felt nervous. The truth was, I had spent years making excuses because I didn't want anyone to see what my life at home was really like. But after months of asking, I finally gave in. "Fine," I said with a smile. "Come over Saturday." They cheered excitedly. For the first time in a long time, I actually felt happy. Maybe I had worried for nothing. Maybe Jessica would stay upstairs. Maybe Karen would be nice for once. Maybe everything would finally be normal. So on Saturday morning, I cleaned the living room, prepared snacks, and made sure everything looked perfect. Show my friends to see the best version of my life. At 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Sophie, Emma, and Mia walked in with huge smiles. For the next 30 minutes, everything was perfect. We laughed. We talked about college plans. We watched old videos from school. For the first time in years, I felt like a normal girl. Then I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. And the moment I looked up and saw Jessica standing there with that familiar smirk on her face, a terrible feeling settled in my stomach, because I knew that look. And whenever Jessica wore that smile, someone always ended up getting hurt. Jessica slowly walked in one hand and a large cup of iced coffee in the other. The second she saw my friend sitting with me, her smile changed. Not the friendly kind. The kind she always wore whenever she was about to cause trouble. "Oh wow," she said loudly. "You actually managed to make friends?" Sophie awkwardly smiled. "Hi, I'm Sophie." Jessica barely looked at her. Instead, she stared directly at me. I didn't know charity cases could be so popular. My friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. I immediately stood up. "Jessica, we're just hanging out. Please don't start." She laughed. "Oh, relax, Anna. I'm just joking." That sentence. The same excuse she always used. The same excuse Karen always defended. I forced myself to smile and tried changing the subject. But Jessica wasn't finished. She sat down on the armchair across from us and began telling embarrassing stories about me. Stories from years ago. Stories that were exaggerated. Some of them were completely made up. She mocked the clothes I wore. She made fun of the fact that I worked part-time after school. And then she looked at my friends and said something that made my blood boil. "You know what's funny? Anna acts sweet around everyone, but she's basically the maid of this house." Nobody laughed. Not even a little. Emma looked genuinely shocked. Mia frowned, and Sophie simply stared at Jessica like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. For a moment, the room became completely silent. Jessica clearly expected everyone to laugh with her, but when she realized nobody was supporting her, her expression changed. She looked angry, very angry. Then Karen walked into the living room. Perfect timing. Jessica immediately put on her fake, innocent face. "Mom, we're just having fun," Karen smiled. "That's nice." Then she noticed my friends. Oh, Anna finally brought people over. Before I could say anything, Jessica suddenly stood up. "Actually, Mom, I was just telling them how clumsy Anna is." I froze, because I recognized that tone. It meant trouble, and before I could react, Jessica accidentally bumped into me. The entire cup of iced coffee spilled directly over my hair, my shirt, and my lap. Cold liquid ran down my face. The room went silent. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. Jessica covered her mouth dramatically. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," but I knew that look in her eyes. She wasn't sorry. She was enjoying every second of it. And then she laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an embarrassed laugh. A real laugh. Karen looked at me and sighed. "Anna, honestly, why are you standing so close to people?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jessica dumped coffee all over me, and somehow, it was my fault. I looked at my friends. I expected pity. I expected embarrassment. Instead, I saw anger. Real anger. Sophie stood up immediately. "Excuse me," she said. Emma looked directly at Karen. "Did we seriously just watch that happen?" Mia grabbed some napkins and handed them to me. Jessica suddenly stopped smiling, because for the first time in her life, people weren't taking her side. But she still wasn't worried. She thought this would end the same way it always did. She thought I would cry. She thought I would stay quiet. She thought she had won. She had absolutely no idea that this humiliating moment was about to become the biggest mistake of her life. Because later that evening, I discovered something about Jessica. A secret she desperately wanted to keep hidden. And for the first time in years, I finally had the power. I locked myself in my room and cried for almost an hour. Not because of the coffee, not because my clothes were ruined, but because I was exhausted. Exhausted from years of being blamed for things I didn't do. Exhausted from being treated like I didn't matter. And exhausted from pretending everything was okay. A few minutes later, I heard a knock on my bedroom door. It was Sophie. I opened the door expecting sympathy. Instead, she hugged me. "We're not leaving you alone tonight," she said. Emma and Mia were standing behind her with bags of takeout food. For the first time all day, I smiled. We spent the evening talking and watching movies in my room. And somehow they managed to make me forget what had happened downstairs. Around 9 o'clock, Sophie suddenly frowned. "Anna, I left my charger in the living room. I'll be right back." A few minutes later, she returned with a strange expression on her face. "You're not going to believe this." "What?" I asked. She sat down beside me. When I went downstairs, Jessica was talking to someone on the phone. I rolled my eyes. "So?" Sophie hesitated. "Anna, she wasn't talking about you. She was talking about cheating." My head snapped up. "What?" Sophie nodded. "I only heard part of it, but she was telling someone that her boyfriend had no idea she was seeing another guy." Emma's eyes widened. Seriously, Sophie nodded again. "And apparently her boyfriend is planning to propose next month." I froze. Jessica's boyfriend, Ryan, had been dating her for 3 years. He was honestly one of the nicest people I had ever met. Unlike Jessica, he always treated everyone kindly. And suddenly I remembered something. Earlier that week, I had accidentally seen flowers and a jewelry store bag in Ryan's car. He really was planning something. Meanwhile, Jessica was cheating on him. At first, I told myself it wasn't my business. I didn't want drama. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. But then I remembered the laughter, the coffee running down my face, Karen blaming me, and Jessica enjoying my humiliation. For years I had protected her secrets. For years I stayed quiet. And what had silence ever done for me? Nothing. 2 days later, fate handed me something I never expected. I was leaving work when I saw Jessica at a cafe. She wasn't alone. She was sitting with another guy. And they weren't acting like friends. They were holding hands, laughing, kissing. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and I recorded everything, not because I planned to use it. At least, that's what I told myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the video over and over again. Delete it. Keep it. Delete it. Keep it. But before I could decide, my phone rang. It was Ryan. His voice sounded excited. "Anna, I need your opinion on something." My stomach dropped. He sent me a picture, an engagement ring, and one simple message. "Do you think Jessica will say yes?" At that moment, I realized I had a choice. I could stay silent and let an innocent man spend the rest of his life with someone who didn't love him. Or I could finally stop protecting the person who had spent years destroying mine. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. He stared at Ryan's message for almost 10 minutes. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to delete the video and move on with my life. But deep down, I knew one thing. Ryan deserved the truth. So instead of answering his question about the ring, I sent him a simple text. "Can we meet tomorrow? There's something important you need to know." The next afternoon, we met at a quiet coffee shop. Ryan arrived with a huge smile on his face. He looked genuinely happy, and that made what I had to do even harder. "Anna, you're making me nervous," he joked. I took a deep breath. "Ryan, before you propose to Jessica, there's something you deserve to see." His smile slowly disappeared. I handed him my phone, and I watched his expression change. Confusion, shock, disbelief, pain. He watched the entire video without saying a word. When it ended, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "How long has this been going on?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I couldn't let you marry someone without knowing the truth." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he nodded. "Thank you for telling me." And just like that, he stood up and left. I honestly thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, Karen announced that she was organizing a family dinner because Ryan had important news. Jessica spent the entire day acting excited. She was convinced a proposal was coming. She even bought a new dress. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That evening, everyone gathered around the dining table. Jessica sat beside Ryan with a huge smile. Karen looked happier than I had ever seen her. Then Ryan stood up. Jessica practically squealed with excitement. She thought he was about to get down on one knee. Instead, he placed his phone on the table and pressed play. The room fell silent. The video, my video. Jessica's face turned completely white. Karen stared at the screen in disbelief. "No, no, this can't be real," Jessica shouted. But it was. Everyone saw everything. Ryan looked at her with tears in his eyes. "I was going to ask you to marry me," he said. "But you clearly made your choice." Then he removed the ring box from his pocket. And instead of opening it, he placed it back inside his jacket. Jessica burst into tears. Karen immediately tried defending her. "There must be some misunderstanding." But Ryan shook his head. "I saw enough." And then he walked out. Jessica ran after him, but he never looked back. For the first time in her life, Jessica couldn't manipulate anyone. The next few weeks were chaos. Karen and Jessica argued constantly. People who knew the truth stopped supporting Jessica. And slowly, the perfect image she had spent years creating completely collapsed. As for me, something unexpected happened. Karen came into my room one evening. She looked older somehow, tired, ashamed, and for the first time since I had known her, she apologized. "Anna," she said quietly, "I should have protected you. Instead, I failed you." I didn't know what to say, because some wounds don't disappear overnight. But hearing those words, after years of silence, meant more than she could imagine. A few months later, I moved into my own apartment. I continued college. I kept working. And for the first time in my life, I finally felt free. Last week, Sophie asked me a question. Do you regret exposing Jessica? I thought about it for a moment. Then I smiled. No, because I didn't ruin her life. She ruined her own. And as I closed the door to my new apartment that night, I realized something. Sometimes revenge isn't screaming. Sometimes revenge isn't violence. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to protect people who never protected you. And honestly, that cup of coffee she poured over my head turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, because it finally taught me my worth. And I promised myself, never again would I let anyone treat me like I was invisible.